I'm honored to be here with you all today. SMUD has been such an amazing community leader, and the opportunity to partner with you all and deliver this presentation is something I don't take lightly. I will start off by just introducing myself and the organization I represent. I'm with Sierra Donor Services. Our big mission is simply to save and improve lives through organ, eye, and tissue donation. I have some photos here and just kind of a snapshot of who we are in the community. We work from the greater Sacramento region all the way out to Reno, Nevada. And I'm so excited to share what we do. But before I do that, I want to start with my own personal story. When I was only 15 years old, out of nowhere, my kidneys stopped working, and I was a healthy teenager. I'm almost 6 feet tall, which is unheard of for Filipinos. So lucky me, I got to be as tall as I am, and then unfortunately, I needed to be on dialysis. I hate looking at this picture, but it reminds me of where I came from. And I'm very, very blessed in that my dad was a perfect match, so to speak, in regards to our blood type is the same, and a lot of the genetic markers worked out for him to be my kidney donor. That transplant lasted me from when I was 16 to when I was 22, and then my mom was able to give me my second kidney. So the second time I was on dialysis, it was a awakening for me to really take care of my health. And since then, I've been an advocate for communities of color getting the information about organ donation. In 2010, I was able to get my degree from Sac State. I married my college sweetheart, Steve. And then in 2017, my mom's kidney allowed me to be a mom myself. That's our son there, Imani, there on my chest in 2017. And then there's him last year as we gave the proclamation in Rancho Cordova, where we live. So after 25 years of being a volunteer for Sierra Donor Services, I realized that this was really my calling. So now I'm the executive or the external affairs director, and my whole mission is to connect with our local community, and working with partners like SMUD really makes it happen for us. I also want to talk about the work that we do makes these transplants happen. Not everyone is as fortunate as me to have relatives who match. Sadly, there are several people in the community who are waiting for organs. And it's the generosity of our donor heroes who often are the ones who save these lives. Like I said, I was very lucky that my parents matched me, but if that weren't the case, if my parents didn't match me, I could have been waiting on a waiting list for 8 to 10 years. In our region, the need is so high, but the participation is so low that people wait a terribly long amount of time on dialysis before they get their organs. So I'm just profoundly grateful for everyone who says yes and checks yes at the DMV to become a donor. And we're so thankful for all of the donor heroes who pass away and make the decision to donate. And with that said, I wanted to pass it on to Miss Nancy Bowie Thompson. My screen.
Well, thank you, Kyla. So being a donor is truly a gift. My husband and I, we were together, our anniversary is actually next week. We would have been together, both dating and married, almost 17 years. And one of the first conversations we actually ever had was about how we wanted to live our lives, both in the present and the future. Strangely, both my husband and I knew our mortality was going to be short. We thought more like in our 60s and maybe early 70s, but there was something in our past and our dreams that knew that we had to live life every day like it was the last. And so right after we got married, almost immediately, I brought us into our attorney's office and drew a will and trust. And it was very specific. We used to joke about, I don't want to be a cadaver on someone's table. Medical student, they're great. That's what he initially wanted. And I said, oh no, that's not happening. But what we talked about was what we wanted after and what decisions had to be made. So in our will and trust, it was very specific. We both have certain DNRs, which is do not resuscitate. Clauses, it's by age. So, I first was like, nope, take me off and give me away. But we talked about what it meant to stay alive, to be able to donate our organs. And so we were very specific in our wishes. So that's another thing when you check the donor box at the DMV, it's typically just your major organs. So we were very specific in our will. It's cornea, tissue, bone. I'm Buddhist. I feel that there is a life thereafter. And so take every part of me that you can. And that is the way my husband thought. Also, he was 6'7", if anybody ever got to meet him. He was a gentle giant, and he would joke, I want to give everything and put it in a small box. And that's what happened. But there were decisions that had to be made along the way. My husband tragically crashed physically. He had a day. He was an extreme athlete. He had ridden over 70 miles. He had just a diminished capacity after having COVID. So Paul and I had escaped COVID for the whole time. And unfortunately, he caught it in July, and he just was never the same. My husband was one of the best athletes that you will ever meet. He could pick up a sport and be at NCAA anything. But he was running himself after having COVID like he was still that athlete. So after a 70-mile ride, he hadn't quite taken care of himself and didn't hydrate appropriately. He was walking and he passed out and he hit his head. He had a hypoglycemic drop. Unfortunately, he did not get the care that he needed in the 24 hours. We rushed him to neuro and Sutter, stabilized him, but it was touch and go, and he was doing great for the week that he was there. We admitted him into rehab because we thought he was on the mend. Unfortunately, he had a 4-way brain bleed that was exacerbated by a day of exercise because my husband was the overachiever and wanted to push himself on a first day of rehab. Unfortunately, I left him for a short while to say goodbye to my friend that was next door, who was my age, who didn't wake up in the morning, had a cardiac event, and I was saying goodbye to her in the other wing. When I came back, my husband had crashed. So I had to make some pretty dramatic decisions in those 24 hours. We did everything we could to save him, but there was a point a day later where there was a fork in the road, and he was literally crashing. And I had to make a decision. Do I preserve his organs, or do I try the 1% and shock his heart to hope that he may survive? So within 30 seconds, I knew exactly what I needed to do because we had talked about it. My husband and I had had many conversations about what he wanted. And actually 2 weeks before his tragic fall, we have these check-ins with each other, and it's called the Are You Good check-ins. And we had asked if we were good and if we were happy, and he was. So we'd asked if we die tomorrow, do we have any regrets? And the only regret is that we weren't able to have children. Other than that, Paul and I lived life like it was our last. And so when the surgeon team came and said, you need to make a decision now, and I made a decision to save his organs and to preserve him. And that's where Sierra Donor Services came in and were angels and were with me. It was about a 4-day process to make sure all the tests were clean. And of course, my husband, like in life, he passed every test with flying colors. He was, we never knew his blood type, which we used to joke about that. He was an A positive, which is just a signifier of Paul. He was A plus, even in death. And so the donor services team was with me 24/7 for those final days. And we were able to preserve every organ. Every organ was able to be donated. We were able to send them off with a hero walk. We had over, close to 75 people come and line the walls of the ER towards the OR. And we said goodbye. And my husband gave his life. And every day he was a high school teacher. And in death, gave every one of his organs. He had beautiful blue eyes, and he gave both of his corneas. He was 6'7". All of his bones were harvested and will last over 3 years, continually saving people. His tissues were harvested. So in life, he was wonderful and he was perfect, as perfect can be. In death, he will continue to give. So what I ask is that you have the conversations, because people don't realize that only 1%, maybe 2% of those who actually designate themselves to be a donor actually are successful. My husband had what was called the perfect death. He had a brain death, which means his body was fully intact. He did not have cancer. He was not sick, but that was not by accident. My husband was one of the healthiest men alive, and he did that because he knew one day he wanted to be an organ donor. He preserved his body in every way. He would eat these large salads. There wasn't a day in our lives we didn't work out, that he didn't do something active. He was very aware of his mortality. He was very aware of his health. People that are 6'7" don't usually die healthy. He was in exceptional shape. The people that had waited on the list were of his size. So think about it. You can't just put a 6'7" man's heart into a child's body. So the people that were recipients had been waiting, were people that probably would have continued to wait just because of the organs that needed to be transferred. And my husband knew that. He knew how important it was. He took care of himself. And he wanted to make sure that I knew what he wanted. So all I can say is have those conversations, know what your spouse, your loved one, your kids, because we didn't expect this to happen. He was one of the healthiest men you'll ever meet and one of the kindest. But I did not have to think about it. I did not have to guess. I had it written down, but I had had continual conversations with him over the 17 years we were together as to what we would want. And so I obviously would love him to be here, but I know that his life truly will continue on in his thousands of students. He was a 27-year teacher at Amiraloma High, but with the 40 and counting of people, not just of his major organs, I truly feel that somebody will change the world because they receive something from him.
Wow, Nancy, thank you so much for sharing your story so courageously. Um, we know specifically that 6 people are living because of him. If it's okay, I'd love to share that his right kidney was given to a 23-year-old young man in Northern California. His left kidney was went to a 37-year-old woman in Northern California. His left kidney was given to a 37, his pancreas saved a 37-year-old woman in Southern California. His liver saved a 55-year-old woman in Northern California. The gift of his lungs, as you said, lungs that big would have to go to someone of the same size, and it saved a 65-year-old man in Northern California. Those are 6 lives that were directly impacted and saved, because of his generous gift. And as a recipient, I don't take that lightly. And I'm just so thankful from the bottom of my heart to everyone who says yes to this. I don't get to do this often, sometimes people are very private about these decisions. And so I'm so thankful that not only is Paul making a difference in other people's lives, but you, Nancy, by sharing this story, are going to influence others. So I'm just so thankful that you're a part of this. So I want to talk more about how donors make a difference and what the need is. So I'm going to go back and share my screen. Sierra Donor Services has a big area. We serve almost 2.7 million people in a 13 county area. We work with 2 transplant centers, that's UC Davis and Sutter, and we partner with community organizations throughout this region. We're really proud to say we recovered 401 organs to save people's lives last year. 153 people, which is a huge number. And every single person that I work with can say, we're all very passionate about making these lives, saving these lives and making this happen. So some of the numbers I wanted to share is in the United States, over 100,000 people are waiting for life-saving organs. And in California, we take up a fifth of that list. 20,000 people in California alone are waiting for organs. 85% are waiting for kidneys, and 79% of the folks are people of color. If you see in the blue graph there, or the pie chart, Sacramento is a very diverse area. It's going to take all of us to say yes. Specifically, I look at the authorization rates. This is who's saying yes. I think it's pretty clear if you see the Asian category there, it's less than 13% say yes to organ donation. That means 1 of every 10 families that we approach say yes to organ donation. And that's something I feel personally, I want to change that number. I'm hoping that we can work with organizations like yours to have these conversations with our community folks and say, you do affect lives and you do have the opportunity by saying yes to save lives. When I share this slide, it's a sad one. Every 10 minutes, a person is added to the National Transplant Waiting List. 8,000 people die every year because there's not enough organs out there. I also have a picture of my friend Sonia Archie. Sonia was like me. We were lifelong advocates for communities of color waiting for organs. She was waiting on a heart and a kidney, which is much harder. And for her, she got a call. She was a single mother, and she got a call from Stanford that a heart and a kidney was available. So she left her daughter with her mother, drove all the way out to Stanford. From Sacramento, it could be 4 hours if you're in traffic. But when you get that call, if you're on the list, you just got to drop everything and go. And so she went, but when she got there, the family had actually rescinded their decision. They changed their mind last minute. And so brokenhearted, she had to just drive back home to Sacramento, and she died in 3 days. And I share that story because we hear about these statistics of people, but you don't get the story. And I wanted to share her story and honor the fact that, her life's purpose, like mine, was to make a difference for her community. She didn't want to see other Black people dying waiting for organs. And I feel the same way about my community as well. So just a little background on some of the statistics. Like I mentioned earlier, 1 person can save so many lives, just like Paul did. And 1 organ and tissue donor can save up to 8 lives and restore the health of 75 others. As I mentioned, Paul had 6 amazing organs that were able to be recovered to go to people, as I've mentioned. And that's rare. We're very lucky that he was so healthy that he had such viable organs that will be with people for a very long time. Some of my work is dispelling the myths about organ donation. And I think that's true of every culture. There's myths about, who can become a donor and who can't. I hear a lot of the time, oh, I'm too old to donate. You don't want my organs. When in fact, any age group can donate. You have no idea how healthy some of your organs may be, or your tissues and other viable parts. The oldest organ donor in U.S. history was actually 95 years old. He was a veteran who had a great liver, apparently, since that liver was able to be transplanted into someone else. So you never know. We always tell people, just register, say yes, tell your family, and let the doctors sort out, what's viable or not. Another thing I like to mention, again, healthy tissues and organs. Just for Pride Month, I've made the heart into a rainbow. There's also a myth that if you are in the LGBTQ community, you can't become an organ donor, and that's not true as well. There's also a myth that your religion might not support it, and that's not true. Every major religion supports organ donation. There are a few exceptions. Some religions believe it's a personal choice. I know in Islam, Muslims believe that being an organ donor is a generous thing so long as you're not monetarily compensated, which in the United States, that's illegal anyway. So that wouldn't preclude you from being an organ donor here. And then I always hear, oh, don't register me as an organ donor. Maybe if the ambulance comes to save my life, they're not going to save my life if they see that I'm an organ donor. And I know that is far from the truth. I know all of the medical professionals I've ever worked with, I ask them, I say, oh, does it change the process when you know the person's an organ donor? And they're like, absolutely not. They don't typically even know who's an organ donor until the time is critical where that's even brought up. And that's way down the line. Sometimes I get the question, is my family going to have to pay the cost of the donation and the transplantation for the recipients? And that's not true as well. Insurance pays for the transplants, recipients. It gets charged to the transplant recipient. It's the short answer there. And then some of the other myths I hear is that, I see so many news stories about people getting transplants. People must be fine. And like I said earlier, that's not the case. It's really rare how people are able to become organ donors. And so there's always a myth. There's so many people dying. Why aren't there more donors? That's just not the case. So this is why we need many more people to just register, say yes, and make sure your family knows that this is what you want. So I want to talk about how you can make a difference. You at SMUD there. First thing you can do is become a donor yourself. Register as an organ, eye, and tissue donor via sierradonor.org. As I said, tell your loved ones, tell your family that this is what you want to do. And we're hoping to partner with SMUD to do some more conversations in the community, since you have a big reach, and you're trusted. So we really would love to have that partnership. We have some events coming up. Multicultural donor awareness is in August. We'll be doing our own webinar as well. I'll make sure that the GRAIN group gets the link to that so you can watch. And then moreover, we have a Be the Gift 5K walk run. It's a superhero theme to kind of punctuate the fact that organ donors are superheroes, especially in my opinion. And that's October 14th. So I hope to see a big group from SMUD come out for that. And then we have a donor memorial that we do every year called the Locks of Legacy. What I love about this is we offer every donor's family an opportunity to engrave a heart-shaped lock that gets affixed to our gate at our office. In the last few years, we've had virtual ceremonies that are just not the same. This year, our ceremony is going to be in person at Sac State's Ballroom. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with our families again. That's one thing that I love about our work is that it's not just about the recovery of the organs, but it's really about staying with our families. We stay with the families through their difficult decisions. We stay with the families through their grief cycle. We make sure that we have resources as needed, just to make sure that they know we don't take these gifts lightly. This is literally giving life to others. And I just want to conclude by saying thank you all for your time. I want to make sure I have time for questions to be answered. I did want to say, I know Nancy mentioned that Paul was a bone donor, and sometimes there's a misconception that when you're a bone donor, you are not able to have an open casket funeral. And the truth is, they're able to actually reconstruct the body if that's the preference of the family, to have like a biodegradable, to have a biodegradable replacement, so that in your casket you'll look just as though you're intact. I think some people are dissuaded from saying yes to organ, eye, and tissue donation, thinking that those funeral customs and preferences won't be able to be carried out, but they still are. I just want to make sure that's clear. So I hope that doesn't prevent anyone from saying yes to that. Anything else? I see a question from Maria, who are not allowed to donate. Is the question like which ethnic or community or religious groups say no to donation? Or is that like a medical rule out question? Well, I know that different hospitals have different requirements for what organs are viable as donors. Yeah, medical rule outs. Yeah. So sometimes hospitals have more specific guidelines. I'm not as familiar because I don't work on the transplant side. But if you ask one of my friends who's on dialysis waiting for a kidney, would she take a kidney from someone who's over 65? I think she would say yes. She would say yes to that over being on dialysis another day.
I don't know, I would just say when in doubt, say yes.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, the worst they can say is no, right? So, um, I just want to emphasize is you need to have the conversations because as you had mentioned, somebody rescinded, right? But if that person maybe had had the conversations with their family, they
Yes.
probably wouldn't have rescinded, right? So have the conversations with your children.
Yeah.
I know that's a scary thing, but like, they're 18, have the conversation with your aunts and uncles. I've talked to people at SMUD that don't have a will, that have not
Mhm.
designated
Yeah.
what they want to do. You don't need to go to an attorney. Write it down. Write
Right.
it on a piece of paper. Say, I want to give everything and anything. you know,
Yeah.
I want you to not shock my heart. So that's something also I had known. I've been in healthcare for 15 years. If we had shocked his heart to try to save him, it would have made his heart unviable.
Mm.
So it's things like that, like have the conversations with your spouse, or whoever of what in the last moments, what do you want me to do? And luckily the Mercy team was amazing. They were able to keep him alive chemically and didn't have to, but I had to make the decision and it was a point of no return at that point. So because I knew exactly what he wanted. I knew that he wanted to save lives. So it's not just about the organs, it's about the end of life. It's about, do you want to be, I know this is hard, but do you want to be in a vegetative state for the rest of your life and possibly never wake up? It's not like the movies.
Right.
I think a lot of people think that because you see people that wake up from coma, well, they do, but the brain is alive. So, like in my situation, I had two doctors come in and I wanted to be sure.
Yeah.
And so we had two different doctors come and declare a brain death.
Mhm.
But that's not, those people don't wake up. My friend in the other room also was a donor. He actually had to make the decision because it was not a brain death. So, but he had had those conversations with her. And so
Yeah.
it was sad. We lost two amazing tennis players within 2 days of each other, but luckily they were both organ donors and
Wow.
literally on one side of the wing and the other. And these two incredible people were young and vibrant and had tragic things happen, but in their tragedy and our family's tragedy, they were able to save. But again, it was the conversations that were had, and he knew what his wife wanted. I knew what my husband wanted. So just make sure that there are no doubts in the process because it's hard as it is. It's hard losing your best friend. So if you can have those decisions and conversations made in advance,
Mhm.
it will bring some peace to you when
Absolutely.
that time comes.
I'm so glad you said that, Nancy, because if my friend Sonia's prospective donor had registered, the family would not have been able to rescind that decision. So that's why we really emphasize the registry.
I want to thank you, Kyla, for being here today, and especially Director Bowie Thompson for sharing your story. I know it takes a lot. I'm kind of glad I had the option to turn off my camera from so nobody would see my ugly cries or anything like that. But we really appreciate it on behalf of Grain, for you participating with us today. I know that in the chat, there's a lot of there's a lot of hearts, and thank you for sharing your stories. And I think Jim even posted a picture there, which I thought was cute, and it says, your legs will forgive you eventually. I guess this was when they had to do the walk in her shoes kind of thing. So
Oh,
yeah, so very
Yeah, Paul was part of the SMUD team every year. I think him and Jose Badip, remember, were the tallest ones on the team, and I would not let Paul cheat. He actually had to wear high heels. I think Arlen cheated with wedges one year. But no, Paul was part of the SMUD Walk a Mile Weave team every year. He bled through his white socks every time.
Oof.
I think he ended up wearing a size 22 women's or something, but he that was him. Anything I asked of him, he would do. My husband, he never said no to me or anything that SMUD needed from him.
Oh, I love it.
Anyone have any questions or comments? If not, at this time, I'd like to invite everybody also to turn on their cameras. If we could take a photo op at this time as well. So as everybody's turning on their cameras, be brave, turn on the cameras.
Laura,
See,
come here.
there is a question
Yeah, I can answer
in the
that
chat.
question. Mhm.
Okay, go ahead. It
It's
says,
the
is it
question
possible
was,
for organ donors? Yeah, go ahead.
is it possible for organ donors to choose to donate their organs directly to save lives, but exclude them from being used for purposes such as academic research? The answer is yes. When you register through donatelifecalifornia.org, you can even specify what organs you want to say yes to or not. But becoming a donor for academic research is very specific. You have to select that specifically. So even if you're already registered, I encourage you to go to donatelifecalifornia.org and just check to see what boxes you have checked. All right.
Frankie also wanted to mention that was him in the wedges, Nancy. So, Frankie, did you switch to high heels after, or did you still cheat with wedges?
I didn't just cheat with the wedges. Debbie reminded me that I might turn my ankle, so I taped them on like a football player. It was kind of cheating.
I wear wedges. I don't care.
Comments very inspiring. You should be proud of your husband and yourself, Nancy. A lot of thank yous for sharing your story. Let's see. Oh, Laura Lewis said, and my husband, can you put that website? Oh, can you also put that website in the chat?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Go, Gabby.
And is there
I have
more
my team
people
on here with me.
coming?
All right. Did we already take the picture? Are we smiling?
No, everybody's got to turn on their
anybody-
camera. I see lots of little photos.
Okay.
Okay, are we ready?
So 1, 2, 3, everybody with their camera on. 1, 2, 3.
3,
Cheese.
cheese. Got it. Thank you.
Oh, look at all those little heads.
Again, I want to thank
Great.
everybody for joining us today. One of the reasons why Grain decided to go ahead and head it up was when Kyla shared the presentation and I saw how small the number was of Asian donors. I thought, well, we really need to get the word out there. I'm not sure how many people are still on the line, but just basically from a show of hands, how many of you guys do know people who are on a transplant list or waiting for an organ? If you could raise your hand, maybe that will kind of give everybody an idea of, how big of a need there is for organ donors out there. I myself am an organ donor, but my family always teases me, well, what can they actually take from you? Your kidneys are probably no good. Your heart's no good. So, but looks like we do have a lot on there. Again, I want to thank everybody for coming today. And then we do plan on having Sierra Donor Services come back probably around open enrollment time to share more information and just bring more awareness out there. And again, thank you, Nancy, so very much for being here today with us and sharing your story. It's very inspiring. I honestly learned a lot from this presentation too today. Make sure we check the will and have those hard conversations that a lot of us just do not want to have because it's something that we just don't want to talk about, or it's kind of like taboo, don't talk about it, it won't happen kind of thing. But hearing you today, it really gave me a sense that it is one of those conversations that you have to have with family members. So it's not as difficult when the time comes. But I was curious too, though, Nancy, when you said even if it's written down. I know that some of you may know my father is elderly, and he had told me what he wanted. But when I was in the hospital trying to tell the hospital, well, he doesn't want this, and this is what he wants to do, they were telling me because it wasn't written down in an order or anything, they weren't going to honor it. So it kind of makes me wonder.
That's
mentioning how-
interesting. Yeah. As the were you the registered my brain isn't working right now, but his executor, his power of attorney? Yeah, so if you are a power of attorney or a spouse, you have the right to translate wishes. It's just helpful as the person that is the power to have it written down. It's just helpful. But no, even if I hadn't had it written down because I was his spouse and power of attorney, I could make decisions on his behalf. So maybe was your mother still alive, possibly? Because she would have been the person that can make decisions. So it's whoever's written down as power of attorney or his spouse.
That's good to
So
know.
again, make sure that's all handled. I know attorneys that do not have a will and trust. But they're getting one now after this. So make sure, again, just write it down. Write it down so you don't have to have to guess.
Absolutely.
Is there any other questions, or I don't see anything in the chat? Again, it says thank you. Many thank yous. Nancy, you can probably read it later on. Lots of thank yous for sharing your story. Great event. And again, I just wanted to thank you everyone for being here today. And Kyla, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I'll make sure you guys have all the info about our upcoming events. We would love to have your participation and just cheering us on, if anything. Yeah. We do a beautiful butterfly release in honor of all of our donors of the year. So it'll be a beautiful ceremony.
And I did hear a challenge in there for SMUD to have their own team. So it looks like
Yeah.
Yay.
SMUD Avengers Assemble.
We do have all those capes from the March of Babies. I still have mine.
There
and
you
Paul's.
go. Yeah. Perfect.
Well, thank you for
we have
having
someone
me.
registering right now. I love it.
Good.
Thank you.
Yay. And thank you again, everyone, for being here. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be having these types of events. So spread the word, and we'll see you again soon. And again, thank you everyone for being here, especially Kyla and Nancy for sharing your stories today and sharing very valuable information. Appreciate it.
Thank you,
you.
everyone.